Meanwhile, on the comic box. Comics. Hey everyone, welcome to the Comic Box, part of the Geek to Geek podcast network. I'm Rob, your friendly neighborhood comic geek, and we got a really cool show for you guys this week. We obviously, of course, as always, just meaning me, but we got a really cool show. We reached all the way across the pond, as they say. I don't know who says that, or if anybody still says that, but we did it, and we have a cool segment at the end of the show where I guess it's an interview, it's really a conversation, with Cava from 2BritishNerdz, who is in London, loves comics, and is all over the interwebs if you haven't run into him yet. But first, the news. News. First, as always, Marvel. 20th Century Fox has obtained some interesting movie rights. It's not another superhero, technically. It's the rights to the life story of the man himself, Stan Lee. I am never gonna get that right. That should be like a life goal, is getting a good impersonation of Stan Lee down. Anyway, they're apparently looking to make it as a 1970s era action movie. And they've already attached producers to the project, Marty Bowen and Wick Godfrew. I'm doing my best with that one. The folks who produced Twilight, and the upcoming Power Rangers movie. The hope is they want to do something similar to Kingsman: The Secret Service. So let's digest this for a second, because we're talking about a very James Bond-ish Stan Lee story. Now, part of me hates the idea, because getting that wrong would be very, very easy. But part of me loves that idea because it feels like it was Stan Lee's idea, who's just like, I think I want a movie about my life, and it's gonna be, like Kingsman. And somebody's like, all right, Stan, you're 90, million years old now? No, he's like 92, 93. Like, yeah, you know what? Cool, that's fine. But here's my thing. They have to get someone that can do the voice. If you cannot produce Stan Lee's voice, which was, at least for me growing up, my connection to the guy, because his voice was on the X-Men cartoons, Spider-Man cartoons, that was, you could see a picture of him, but the voice feels so unique to Stan Lee. So no voice, no dice. Sticking with Fox Marvel movie news, we have learned that Mr. Sinister, who was teased at the end of X-Men Apocalypse, will in fact be the, or at least a, villain in next year's Wolverine 3. Snick, snick. In the comics, for those that don't know, Mr. Sinister is a geneticist who is given some sweet powers by Apocalypse. I want to say really far back in the past. I cannot tell you when. I think it was the 1800s, because genetics, hasn't been around that long. And so he's, I guess, immortal, or at the very least his aging has been slowed. And so he's a villain, but not in a traditional take over the world sense. Instead, he's obsessed with genetic and molecular manipulation, trying to create better mutants, that sort of thing. So I think that's kind of cool. That's kind of interesting. And maybe, and this is just a random fan theory, but maybe we will get a movie introduction of X-23 as a clone made by Sinister, who can then go on to star in future X-Men films, because reportedly this is Hugh Jackman's last as the character. So just an idea, Fox, but come on, why wouldn't you, right? I guess I always have to say, for those that don't know, X-23, female clone of Wolverine, who now is the main star of the Wolverine comic book as the current day Wolverine. This next piece of news is going back a little bit, but here's some Iron Man 3 news. A long time ago, I think in the past year, director Shane Black revealed that Dr. Maya Hansen, played by Rebecca Hall, was originally meant to actually be the film's main villain, at least in an earlier draft of the script. But that was vetoed by Marvel studio executives, because reportedly, no one's gonna buy an action figure of a female villain. Nerd rage! I'm blocking myself. I'm alone in this booth, but I can feel it radiating through the internet at me. So, obviously that's stupid, because who out there owns an Aldrich Killian action figure? But in either case, it created a lot of rage, as everything does on the internet at that time that happened. But this past week, the story was confirmed by Rebecca Hall, who did an interview, and I'm sure for something else entirely, who said that her character, Hansen, wasn't necessarily entirely the villain. She says there were several phases to that, but that in the end she felt that she signed on to do one thing, and what she ended up doing was something very different. So that's a shame. It would have been cool to have a female villain for a movie. There's no reason to not. We have Madam Hydra, we have Madam Mask, lots of Madams in the Marvel Universe, but it's not like we don't have female villains out there. So shame, but there's an extra boost of geek rage for you guys to spread around the internet. Marvel TV news. Marvel is bringing some of that TV love to New York Comic Con this year. Fans are reportedly going to watch a new episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that features Ghost Rider. They will get a first look at the upcoming Iron Fist Netflix show and a first look at the upcoming FX show Legion, which ties into the X-Men film franchise. So if you're really curious to see what Ghost Rider looks like, you can either go to New York Comic Con or you can Google it, because they have also released images of both Robbie Reyes as a normal person and also with the flaming skull, and the car has the flaming tires and stuff in the background. And I think they even released an extended trailer. I didn't watch it, but while I was scrolling through the news there. So there are things up there if you just want to see what the character looks like. Otherwise, I'm personally excited to see what we get out of Iron Fist, and hopefully something will get posted on YouTube or something officially, so it's good quality. Which is smart, because New York Comic Con is the first week in October, October 7th, and so by that point, Luke Cage will already have aired, so, you always want to keep people hooked for the next thing, so it's good timing on their part. So hopefully it'll be a long first look. DC Comics, hey, happy Batman Day! You may have missed it by the time this airs, so I apologize depending on when this goes out. But if you're hearing this soon enough, Saturday, September 17th is Batman Day. DC Comics has been doing this for the last couple years. There's a link in the show notes. It is literally dccomics.com/Batman Day. The goings on, it basically depends on your local comic shop, or sometimes it's Barnes & Noble bookstores. In the past, I know there have been Batmobiles that show up. People do costume contests. Cosplayers show up, there's free comic giveaways, but it's really, again, it depends on what's going on at your local store. So hit up your local shop online, give them a call, figure out what they're doing. Otherwise, on the official Batman Day page, there are locations that have officially registered as Batman Day locations. So my local comic shop, for example, isn't on there, but there's one that's just one town over that says they're on it, though it doesn't say what exactly they're doing. So I guess you would go see which ones are signed up and then go to their Facebook page or whatever and just see what they have going on. Part of me really wants to tell you guys and lie to you, my dear listeners, and tell you that you get a special discount if you go in and say, "You must say there is Martha. My mom's name is Martha. Why did you say the name Martha?" But I'm not that cruel. But feel free to do that to your friends. Like, bring them along and say, hey, by the way, you'll get a free blank if they do their best, gravelly Batman voice. And my name's Martha. My mother's name, Martha. Probably not good to do when I still have a podcast to finish. Anyway, moving on, Superman's identity is kind of secret again in the comics. For those not currently reading Action Comics, which I've actually heard good things about, not following myself, but the New 52 Superman is dead. The pre-New 52 Superman is back as Superman, but for some reason, there's also a third Clark Kent out there that, as far as we know, is human. Because... So in the most recent issue of Action Comics, Clark Kent holds like a press conference to say why he disappeared for a while and how he's not the current Superman and that they're two different people. So, because apparently in the past somebody outed Superman and Clark Kent as being the same person. Here's what I'm seeing. I am seeing a Clark Kent reestablishing that he and Superman are different. I'm going to expect that this Clark Kent is not actually Clark Kent, but someone else in the future, and this is just DC's way of trying to put the genie back in the bottle and return things to the status quo. The same as, Spider-Man revealing his secret identity during the first Civil War and then making a deal with Mephisto, which is basically Marvel's version of the devil, to have his identity secret again, and sacrificing his relationship with Mary Jane so they weren't married anymore, so it could resemble the comics. I'm seeing this as just probably part of the larger rebirth thing to bring things back to some sort of status quo, which is kind of sad, because if you're going in that direction where Superman and Clark Kent is no longer necessary, I guess, for Superman, like, I'm cool with that. You know, I guess eventually they'll have to figure out a way to bring it back around, and I guess that's exactly what this is doing. But yay, status quo, I guess, perhaps. Or I could be wrong, and everything could go totally in a different direction. But in any case, that's news out of the comic books, and I like doing in comic book world news. That's not movie or TV show. Speaking of all things super, if you're a fan of the new Supergirl show and you want to know a little bit more about the character, DC has announced a new comic book that's starting this December called Supergirl Being Super, that basically is a retelling of the character's origin. They say it's going to be similar to last year's Superman American Alien in that it is not part of normal DC continuity, so you can learn the basics of the character without being weighed down by a ton of continuity. It's a 4-issue miniseries. Like I said, first issue hits this December. Also coming up in December is the DC Rebirth Holiday Special, a 96-page prestige format book filled with all sorts of holiday shenanigans. DC has done holiday books in the past. In general, they're a fun read. It's not also weighed down by continuity. There's not a lot of things you have to know about DC to read them. They're just a bunch of little silly stories, often done by popular creators. Here's the official description. Don't miss a Hanukkah crisis for Huntress. A Flash family Christmas, Wonder Woman crashing John Constantine's hell-blazing pagan party, and more. And, in a must-read story, the Simian Sleuth Detective Chimp spreads his own unique brand of holiday cheer. And New York Times best-selling writer Paul Dini, Dark Knight, a true Batman story. Oh, come on, he's the guy who created Harley Quinn. That's how he should be credited. Anyway, crafts a Harley Quinn holiday tale featuring DCU guests that weaves together all of these stories in the weirdest way possible. So in other words, it'll be snippets of a Harley Quinn story throughout the book, and then you get stories with Huntress, Flash, Wonder Woman, Constantine, and Detective Chimp, who, yes, is a chimpanzee who dresses like Sherlock Holmes and solves mysteries. Because DC Comics. They wipe out all the other silly characters, when they do the reboots, but not Detective Chimp. Why? Because everyone loves monkeys. Great apes. Chimpanzees part of the great ape family. DC Rebirth Holiday Special #1 hits stores on December 14th. Yay! DC Movie News. Justice League director and man who hates color, Zack Snyder showed off the latest Batsuit on Twitter. And it looks like a Night Owl suit. He calls it the Tactical Batsuit. It is basically the same as the last costume from Batman v Superman, but it's a little more padded in areas, which is odd because the last outfit also looked super padded. So, whatever. Also, personal side note, this is just me, and I know I'm being nitpicky here, and I should be a happier geek that these movies are being made at all, but it has always bugged me that the cape is stuck going over his shoulders. Again, just like Night Owl's cape. I get that it's the superhero look, but it also basically makes the cape non-functioning, and he's not able to use it to actually drape himself in it in order to more easily hide in shadows and things. Whatever, there's a link in show notes to that tweet if you want to check out the Tactical Batsuit, stolen from Night Owl. Also, it's official. DC's Jeff Johns says he and Warner Brothers executive John Berg are on a mission to make the DC Extended Universe, which is what they're calling their movie universe, lighter and more hopeful going forward. Cool. Just don't do it to Dark Universe, because the Justice League Dark film should be exactly what Batman v Superman was. It should be dark and it should be moody. You can have a little bit of humor in there if you're using Deadman, and John Constantine always kind of had a wry sense of humor. But in general, that should not be lighter and more hopeful. John says that he wants to kind of do the same thing with the movies he did with DC Rebirth, so we'll see how that goes. Lastly, for DC movie news, just like the Killing Joke got a one-night... Well, I guess Killing Joke got 2 nights, but the upcoming Batman Return of the Caped Crusaders is getting a one-night theatrical release, again thanks to Fathom Events, and it is set for October 10th. This is the cartoon movie that brings back Adam West, Burt Ward, and Julie Newmar in the roles that they played during the 1966 Batman television show. Looks not wonderful. I'm sure I'll end up seeing it at some point. I hope if they go really, 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 really heavy on the camp, then it could be an amazing time. Beyond that, DC TV news. Black Lightning. Remember I told you about this show here, Black Lightning, about a African-American man who has lightning? Well, the show was looking for a network because we were talking last week about whether or not that might be part of the expanded sort of CW DC universe, and it looks like now they found a network, and it is not the CW. It looks like the show is headed to Fox. So expect it to get canceled after 4 episodes. Next, remember how I talked about a Constantine Blu-ray coming out at some point? Well, that point is October 4th, 2016, and it's not just going to be available through that Warner Archive print-on-demand service. It's actually going to be available on WBShop.com, Amazon, and other retailers. So if you're a Constantine fan, you don't need to grovel for your Blu-ray, and I'm assuming DVD set. You can get it where you normally get things. Amazon, where all things are purchased, whether you want them or not. Lastly, for DC TV news, it sounds like we're getting a second season of the animated TV show Vixen. A fan had asked the CW network on Twitter when that was going to be happening, and initially they responded October 14th, then pulled the tweet and replaced it with one saying, "We spoke too fast, but coming soon." So it seems like we might be getting a lot of stuff in October here for DC fans. If you were a fan of the first one, it is also coming out on CW Seed, which is the CW's streaming service. So, if not October 14th, it certainly doesn't seem like it's very far off. Round up doop doop doo deep deep doop 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 boop doo 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 indie comics and stuff. Moving away from the big two, Alan Moore, the bearded monstrosity. Well, I say that Liam is a bearded monstrosity. A more famous bearded monstrosity. Alan Moore, the man responsible for writing Watchmen, V for Vendetta, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, From Hell, and just all sorts of other famous comic books, has announced that he is about to retire from the comic book world, and I'm assuming spend more time with the things growing in his beard. Before he goes, though, he does have a few things that he's finishing up, which includes the final volume of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. So if you're reading things that you know are coming from Alan Moore, don't worry, he's not just immediately disappearing off into the his beard. It's a big beard, you guys. He is going to finish up the things he's currently working on. And he's not done writing. He just figures he's pretty much done with comic books, doesn't really have any more stories to tell, and he doesn't want his work to suffer because he's treading, old ground and going back to the well to write things that he feels he's written before. And that's it for news. Shooby-dooby-doo, shooby-dooby-doo, shooby-dooby-doo. Yabba-dabba-dabba-doom-dum-dum-dum-dum-dum-dum-dum-dum-dum-dum-dum-dum-dum. Reviews. First up on my reviews this week is Green Lantern's number 6. This ends the first arc of this book. The good guys win. The bad guys also sort of win. And as usual, it's got good interactions, in my opinion, between the two main Green Lanterns, Simon Baz and Jessica Cruz. And we find out what that rogue Guardian was exiled for creating. And we don't really know what's happening going forward. And I'm kind of cool with that. Like, it has that one big tease, like the Guardian. It's a ring. The Guardian made a ring. But he says it's a ring that anybody can use, which is sort of one of those, like, I guess we've seen in the past that some rings can't be used by other people, but other times we have, with the exception of Kyle Rayner's ring, which at the time, during the 90s and early 2000s, was coded to his DNA. And I don't know that the other Green Lantern's rings are that way, have that same ability. But in any case, it's some sort of super ring, which also is kind of like the White Lantern ring, which can generate stuff from any color of the emotional spectrum, which Kyle Rayner has. But in any case, it's a super, super ring. Point being, I enjoyed the first arc of this book. I'll let you guys know if I see it coming out on trade, because it's worth picking up, because you don't really need to know anything about Green Lanterns to enjoy it. The characters feel fresh, they feel new, and so I look forward to seeing how this book does going forward. Next up is the other Green Lantern book this week, Hal Jordan in the Green Lantern Corps number 4. Again, a good issue. We got some grade A Guy Gardner bro dude action in this one, which is good, pretty entertaining. It almost felt like a Joss Whedon kind of thing, where it's very, very serious. Guy Gardner has been captured and brought to Sinestro, who's all pissed off because he thought he was getting Hal Jordan instead. So Sinestro has Guy Gardner, and he's doing his bad guy soliloquy and revealing his giant plan. Meanwhile, Guy Gardner's ring runs out of power and his costume fades away. And so Sinestro turns around and Gardner is just standing there naked and obviously proud of it because he's an utter bro dude. And so you get this sort of, what are you doing? Like, how did you become a Green Lantern? Come on. And then Guy Gardner's like, well, throw me my, the backpack he was carrying with this stuff. He's like, yes, please, put clothing on. But no, it's not clothes in there. Guy Gardner was carrying a 6-pack of beer with him. We're not going to ask where he got a 6-pack of beer, if he got it from the previous universe or whatever. It doesn't matter. Again, lots of Guy Gardner goodness. And really, when you look at it, outside of not really knowing what's going on with Hal Jordan, this issue had good Guy Gardner moments. It had some good John Stewart moments. So if somehow they're going to be able to balance all three of those main Green Lanterns, good for them, because they've always kind of had to split some of them off into other books. As always, Green Lantern books, I'm on board. Finally, for this week, I read Wonder Woman number 6, which was part 3 of the year 1 thing. Remember, Wonder Woman is jumping back and forth issue to issue between an origin story and sort of a modern story where she's trying to discover her origins that she doesn't really remember. As always, it's a good read. It's a great artwork. It was a really good example of showing who Diana is at heart, because she's just arriving in man's world, doesn't really speak the language. Kind of feel they did a little bit too much gee whiz, from her. A little bit too, oh gee golly, this is neat, and this is neat, and sure, lock me in a jail cell, that's cool. But at the same time, I think it was also a really good job of speaking to her character, that she's not immediately lashing out because she doesn't understand what's going on around her, which is a key part of the Wonder Woman character, is having a little more wisdom than that and not immediately engaging in, I'm a superhero that doesn't understand something, so I need to punch it sort of thing. We also get a sneak peek at Cheetah, pre-Cheetah. I guess not a sneak peek. The character is in the book, Dr. Minerva, which is very cool. And hopefully that means that we're going to slowly be pulling the two storylines together, because in the modern issues, I guess, the modern parts of this two parallel storylines, however we want to call them, Wonder Woman has gone to Cheetah for help. And so now this is us seeing them meeting for the very first time before Cheetah was turned into Cheetah. Hopefully we're going to start seeing some of those threads come together between the two stories. That's my hope. In any case, as always, I am enjoying it. That is it for reviews. Yeah, the poll list. Here's what's coming up for next week. Green Lanterns number 7. Really? Already? Like 1 week away? Maybe the reason we got 2 Green Lantern books is one was delayed by a week. In any case, that's a lot of Green Lantern, y'all. Mighty Thor, number 11, also coming out. And then I am continuing to plug away at Nightfall on my phone. And I think I talk about it a little bit in my Topic of the Week conversation this week with 2BritishNerdz. I shouldn't say it that way. That's actually kind of mean. Anyway, I am just past the point in the book where Bane has broken Batman's back, which is still like 300 some odd pages into the 600-page read. So I am not going to feel bad for not having finished this each week like I have with previous books. It's going to take me a while. And finally, I did not read it before this, but I am looking forward to a read suggested by our guest this week, which is The Black Monday Murders by Jonathan Hickman and Tom Coker. 2 issues are out so far, and it looks like they're really big issues. They're not the usual 20-some-odd pages, like they're double that. So that's going to be my assigned reading for next week. I'm going to add that in. We'll see if that becomes a regular read for me. My understanding is it's sort of this combination of black magic and like the business world. That seems really cool to me. I'm always down for some occult goodness in my comic books. So that is it for the poll list. In archives, I also have a thing referred to us by Cava, which was a bookstore actually called Watkins, which is London's oldest occult bookstore, or they call themselves an esoteric bookshop. You can find them at watkinsbooks.com. I clicked on their website and looked around a bit. I don't know. I'm not super into occult books, just as far as like reading material and stuff. But if that's your thing, while we were talking about the Black Monday murders, it came up and he said it's a very cool place. So check that out. Otherwise, my suggestion for the archives, again, not a comic book, but I'm going to say Netflix shows, you guys. I'm giving you a head start here. If you haven't watched them yet, Daredevil Season 1, Jessica Jones Season 1, Daredevil Season 2. Luke Cage is coming out on the 30th. You better believe I'm going to have an episode where that is all that I am talking about. Here's your chance to get a head start. Get in there, watch some Netflix Marvel shows, be massively impressed by them so that we can all get together and enjoy Luke Cage together. And I actually might do an episode next week that's a prep for Luke Cage. Maybe I'll do a bit, this was actually a suggestion from the wife, which was do topics of the week where I just kind of give you guys a primer for something that's coming up and explain something you might not know. So I might do a spoiler-ish, but it's going to be the comics, not the show, history of Luke Cage. Actually, I like that idea. So look out for that next week. And then we're going to move into the topic of the week, and I do my little voice intro on there, so I'm just going to tell you guys right now. Our guest this week is Cava from 2BritishNerdz, so let's kick it off with the topic of the week. And topic of the week. All right, folks, so here is our very cool topic of the week that we have this time. We are joined from across the pond by Cava from 2BritishNerdz. Say what's up.
Hey, what's up, man? How are you?
Doing great, man. Thank you for joining me. It is later on in the evening for you, I believe, right now.
Yeah, it's pitch dark. It's 8:30, and it's actually the first time they said in 55 years that it's been hot like this in the UK.
So is that a good or a bad thing?
Oh, that's good, man. You know, the UK weather, you don't know what to dress. You come out in the heat, it rains. You come out in the cold, the heat the sun comes out. So it's pretty messed up. But yesterday was actually the first time where it was so hot. Like during the night, the whole day, it was just humid. Today is humid as well, and tomorrow again it's going to be another 29 degrees. So it's cool. I feel sorry if anyone that's working in this hot weather. I know how you guys feel, but if you're not, enjoy the weather.
So we have a little, just so listeners out there are aware, we have a slight lag between you and I. We will certainly do our best to work with that. And I'll see if I can't tweak that a little bit in post. But just if you hear us, start and stop several times, that is the reason. So let's start with this. Usually when I have a guest on, I like to start by establishing their geek cred. So I've listened to your podcast, I've seen your YouTube channel, but for those that haven't, why don't you very briefly sort of explain where your geekdom lies? Where are the areas that you definitely geek out?
I geek out, I guess. I grew up around Marvel comics, so I geek around I just love Marvel, I guess. Marvel comics is something that I've always liked as a kid. From X-Men to Spider-Man, when I go to the movies, when I see that Marvel logo, I'm like, oh sure, I get excited because I know it's like with a Marvel movie, even if you like it or you don't like it, you always have fun watching it regardless of what it may be. But yeah, I mean, I guess for me, I geek around that. I nerd around and geek around comic books as well, especially taking DC and Marvel to one side, the most addictive comic books that I get excited over has to be Image Comics. It's just I can't really fathom like the creativity that goes into those books, and the way they blow people's minds, like from comics like Invincible, Saga. Even when I read Snot Girl just a few weeks ago, that really had me like, wow. I guess I geek around everything, to be honest. But I think for me, what's really got me really geeked up now and nerded up is when I really started incorporating what I really loved, which is comic books, movies, and the whole, because the whole nerd culture, man, it's not just around comic books, it's around everything. You have toys, figurines, you have Comic-Con, you have TV shows, you have so much content that comes out on a daily basis that, I just love the whole seeing another fact that, as you was telling me that, regarding the geek culture, it's not like back in the day where people used to laugh at you if you read a comic book or if you were into something that was nerdy. Like it's gone to the point of now, it's so mainstream because now we have these corporate companies like DC and Marvel that have tapped into the substance of that geek culture and made it into $1 billion um, revenue. And the good thing now is you don't have to be into comic books to appreciate a DC or Marvel movie. You could watch a DC movie, a Marvel movie, and you can go pick up a comic book in Forbidden Planet and get into what you love. So it's become more accessible to people around the planet. Yeah, but I just love the fact that I just when I started doing my video podcast, that's when I started really really loving because I could actually see um, how much how much fun I actually have because my two British nerds essentially it's a brand slash a business that I'm slowly building up. But I'm having so much fun with it. I'm not really fussed about I guess money because I know the keys in life you have to have you got your passion and you have to have I guess patience because that equals a nice, healthy, balanced lifestyle regarding in your progression in life, being your job, being your brand, your passion, your business. So I
Right.
just love the fact that I'm doing what I love to do, and yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. So now you had mentioned Forbidden Planet, which for people who have never been over to the UK is, I think, the largest comic book uh, store chain in the UK, and it's not just in the
Yes,
UK. It's over Europe because I've been into a Forbidden Planet in London and in Dublin, I think too. They had one there that I went into,
oh okay, yeah,
and they're big, man. They're because normally comic book stores are usually seen as these little tiny, very almost private. There's only a couple people that can fit in the store at a time. They're never
yeah,
really large because it's this little
yeah,
passionate thing. But because the culture has grown and started to incorporate television and movies and posters and games and everything else, then you have stores like
mm,
the London Forbidden Planet, which if I remember, it was years since I've been there,
yeah,
but if I remember correctly, was really big.
yeah. No, it definitely is. I think the one that you were talking about because they moved now. They've moved from it's now located in Shaftesbury Avenue. So they relocated the biggest one, which is the one near to my area. So it's in central London. It's in Shaftesbury Avenue. But it's really, really, it is big. It has 2 floors. But Forbidden Planet is so cool because it's such a cool shop, you know.
Yeah, and that sounds right. Because I want to say the one I had a couple floors, and there are places like that. There's Tower Comics in New York, which is similar. It has several floors of comics. But I did want to bring this up while you were talking about it there, and I don't know if it's as big a thing now as it used to be. And I guess I didn't ask, how old you are and how far back your love of comics goes. But
Yeah.
my understanding is that comic books in the UK is very different from comics in the US, or at least they used to be. Like the Marvel UK imprint would have comics that we never got here, and then at the same time, you would get a lot of comics and stories much later, or even in like a magazine format rather than a standard. Is that
Oh,
still the case?
they still do those. I don't know if you've seen them. They do sometimes those UK reprints with the barcodes on the front cover. So that's the UK ones that they do. But right now, it's all the same. The only issue we have is because we have Boxing Day in the UK, which is like a holiday. So what
Hmm.
happens is on that day, all the comics because they always have late deliveries. They get delayed by maybe a day or two. Uh, but apart from that, no, we get the same. We get the same as you guys do on a weekly basis, which is pretty nice. And I think they kind of realize that maybe it works out better because maybe they can make more money, but it's more accessible, to have it come
Certainly.
out on the same day. Yeah, and there's also now digital comics.
Exactly. That's just what I was going to say. Is yeah, they have the
Yeah,
digital
yeah,
comics
yeah.
now. Yeah.
Man, I can't stand digital comics. I tried to read. I've only read two because one, I remember I was in a rush to catch a plane. I quickly downloaded it, and it was my first time reading a comic book on my iPhone, and I was like, I can't do this. And I think it's cheating because a lot of people say I collect comics, and then they put it on iPad or an iPhone. I'm like, well, you're not actually collecting, are you?
No, that's right. So yeah, so I'm reading through um, the story where Bane breaks Batman's back, the Nightfall Volume One.
Uh-huh.
There's an app that allows me to connect to my local public library, and I can borrow comic books from them digitally on my phone. The problem is it's 600 pages, and I'm about
Yeah, you.
300 pages in, but going panel by panel, and I am
Yeah,
constantly having to flip my phone sideways and back up again in order to let it readjust for whether it's a vertical or a horizontal panel. And it's kind of a task. I don't mind it because it allows me to just read a comic book in bed without having a light on, so I'm not
yeah,
keeping my wife awake, but it's still kind of bothersome. I do love digital comics. I just prefer reading them on my laptop
yeah,
screen rather than
yeah.
on my phone.
I guess the one thing I will say I like about digital comics is if there's a comic book which is out of print and very expensive to get, then digital comics, if you can find that particular issue or that comic run, it's good because it lets you, I guess, get introduced to maybe an arc or a character that you nowadays you can't really get because regarding the movies that have come out, they certain key issues or arcs have really gone up sky high. So that's one thing I love about digital comics. And yeah, one thing I've got to say, if you guys wanna, who's ever listening, if you guys wanna check out my podcasts, just hit me up. I'm on literally on every social media site, I think. So uh, my Instagram is 2BritishNerdz with a Z. My Facebook page again, 2BritishNerdz with a Z. Snapchat, British Nerds, and Twitter is at CAVADJ because I DJ as well, and 2BritishNerds at gmail.com. So feel free to hit me up and I will get back to you guys ASAP. I'm a Instagram, I guess, snap fanatic, and on because I tend to snap a lot on Instagram and especially Snapchat. So you guys can reach me. Then of course the YouTube channel again, 2BritishNerdz with a Z, and check out the video if you guys ever wanna come on the guest on my show. Even if you're overseas, just shoot me an email or DM me. And one thing I do want to say, what my podcast is also about, it's a platform that allows people to express their creativity. If your creativity is you collect stamps, you love talking, you're an illustrator, you're creative, you have a creativity about you that you want to get exposure, feel free. We can do an interview and we can talk about comic books and whatever. So at least that way you guys get more exposure. And the reason I say this also regarding exposure because now social media has gone so big. If you guys really know how to work the social media tool and ride the trend, being with your creativity and business and brand, after patience and a lot of hard work, it will pay off for you. So yeah, that's basically what I wanted to say.
And you beat me to it because my next question was to tell me about the podcast, and now you beat me to it. And just so people know, and
Yeah.
I'll have a link to everything in the show notes there as well.
Oh,
But keep in mind that with Two British Nerds, that is a number two. And I have to ask, and I assume people have asked you this in the past, but who's the
yeah.
other British nerd?
Yeah, it was funny because my friend Tigger, I did the video with, he goes,
Hmm.
bro, I'll ask you a question. I said to him, what? He goes, why are you called 2 British Nerds if there's only one of you? So, okay, essentially, this is what happened. A year ago, I got my friend Alex who's into comics.
Hmm.
So he was talking, and he joined the podcast, and he was in his podcast. They were doing interviews, interviewing like celebrities and people from Walking Dead and so forth. I said to him, you know what? I said to him, he said, look, man. He goes, you talk about comics. I goes, yeah. I goes, why you do a podcast? I was all right, cool. So I said to him, all right, cool. I said, call it 2 British Nerds. And he goes, yeah. So if you guys was to go on my on my first podcast, you would actually see that he's actually on with me, but he's become like I call him a ghost. He appears and reappears when he feels to be. Like he'll call me out of the blue and he goes, yeah, I want to do a podcast. I'll be like, okay, cool. So there is two of us. It feels like an episode of the Three Musketeers. So, but I like it because I knew people would start catching on. They'd be like, "Hold on a second, where's this other guy?" Because sometimes they'll see other people on my podcast and they'll assume that that's the other guy.
Of course.
But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, I'm the guy. I'm the guy that does. Alex is the guy. He just comes. He just comes and basically he just talks. We just talk about comic books and whatever we like. I'm the guy that does the distribution, the content, the publishing, the social media, the marketing. So like, I'm the guy uh that's behind the wheel. But he brings a lot of uh diversity because I'm into Marvel and he's into Marvel and he loves also DC.
Hmm.
So I always love to hear his take on DC, and of course, me and him are big image fans. So that that is pretty much the essence of 2BritishNerdz. I think I'm actually gonna get him to come on a podcast. It's funny because I like it because it's hilarious because I would love the day that my podcast one day it will go completely, I guess, it will go mainstream and they'll ask me, so can you explain to us why there's only one of you? Where's the other one?
And you just have to
Okay,
say no.
so yeah,
You say no. You
yeah,
leave it a
yeah, yeah,
mystery.
yeah,
You leave it an utter mystery.
yeah,
Well, I like that. I like
yeah,
that he's the one that's into Marvel and DC. Because when we were talking before recording about, sort of what topic beyond just talking,
mm,
was, and this was a topic that you covered sort of in your last audio podcast as well,
yeah,
is sort of the difference between Marvel and DC. And I've done a little bit of that on my own as well. And I think with my episode with Liam when
yeah,
we were talking about the trailers for Wonder Woman and for Justice League and how they seem to be trying to change
yeah,
the tone of their movies. But then it's very much like in your most recent YouTube video where the lady, and this is great if you guys haven't seen this, if you're one of my listeners and not one of his,
yeah,
head over to YouTube and check this out because he's just in a park. You're in a park in London,
yeah,
and a couple just sort of walks by and asks what you're doing, and then immediately, because nerd culture is to this point now where it's everywhere, it's ubiquitous and everybody's a part of it. You're like, oh, it's about comic books, and you just start talking about comic book movies with these people, and they're totally down and knowledgeable, and start talking,
uh-huh,
Suicide Squad and Deadpool, and they brought up a point which I think is very true in a lot of ways, which is that DC tends to kind of follow Marvel. Like they see what's working, and it's a normal Hollywood thing. Find out what's working and then do it yourself and
yeah,
try and do it better. And I think the issue is that they started off in the wrong place by making Man of Steel too dark and doing a dark superhero. Well, here's the way I see it. Here's how I figure it boils down. And this goes back to even Golden Age comic sort of thing. But it's always come down to Marvel has always been stories about internal struggle. It's not about Spider-Man fighting, the Juggernaut, for example, is one of the famous stories. It's about the struggle that Spider-Man has internally, figuring whether or not he has the capability to stop the unstoppable, Juggernaut. Or it's about him, trying to deal with the stress of that superhero life while going to school or being married or whatever, where DC has always been external. It's very much about the giant monster that the Justice League is fighting, and they all have their powers and they need to combine them. It's not as much about internal struggle. Now, that's changed a bit, obviously, over the years
uh-huh,
as comics in general have sort of grown up, but I think they sort of flipped that around when it came to the movies, where DC is trying to really internalize things. Everything is very dark. Everybody's very brooding. There is no joy in any of those films because it's all this internal strife, where Marvel doesn't mind using bright colors and bright characters. And certainly there's internal struggles, and we see that in movies like, the Iron Man 3, where he's dealing with PTSD from the invasion and that sort of thing. It's in there,
yeah.
but it's very much about the spectacle, where the DC movies aren't, and I think that's where they're getting things wrong.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. See, one thing I love about Marvel comics, and I think what makes Marvel have more substance and structure is people that don't know, Marvel comics, their comics were actually, when Stan Lee created the X-Men, he based them on, I believe, on the he based I believe Magneto on Martin Luther King, and I think Professor Xavier as how can I forget his name?
I know what you're talking about. It was Professor X as Martin Luther King
Yeah,
and Magneto as Malcolm X.
yeah. So for me, when it's like you have essentially they represent the people of color that will I guess will be in prosecuted for them maybe for their skin complexion because you had a lot of racism back then, but it also represents people that that are just different, like and get bullied. Like for example, people are into comic books or they have a certain something nerdy or something different about them. You always get that the group that will pick on that person. So you had that substance with Marvel, and also like for example the Black Panther, he's just there chilling in his Wakanda. He has people trying to come over to his country to try and invade and take his vibranium. Even the Hulk, when you go back to the substance of the Hulk, he actually gets angry because his dad used to abuse his mum. So Bruce Banner has that stigma of seeing his mum being abused. So that's why that rage pretty much comes from as well. And I guess in that sense, that's why I vibrated to Marvel more because they dealt with real life issues. And that's why Stan Lee did what he did because he based it on real events. I mean, even like Spider-Man, you take away his abilities, he's got problems with his girlfriend. Sometimes he can't pay the rent. There's actually an issue where he actually nearly gets kicked out of his house. So it's a thing of where I guess for me, people say Marvel versus DC. I see it as how which characters do you vibrate to, and how you can relate to them. So for me, I've never been about bashing DC because DC produce really cool comic books. They really do. They do.
Oh
There's
yeah,
no hate
absolutely.
towards DC because I love Constantine, Animal Man, Swamp Thing, Harley Quinn.
Oh, so you're
Yeah.
an old school Vertigo guy then.
See, I love him. When I got into like the New 52, I loved Swamp Thing and I loved Animal Man until it got cancelled, I guess. But when we get to like nowadays, regarding the movies, DC are not producing um movies, and I won't say DC, I'll say Warner Brothers because Warner Brothers owns DC, and I see as because Warner Brothers make so much money in movies, I just think they just don't really care about what's happening within DC because all Warner Brothers has to really do is produce a comic book movie and stay true to their characters. Now, even Marvel changed; they stretched their source material. When we had Iron Man that created Hank Pym, or even when they in Doctor Strange, the guy name they cast as Baron Mordo, but they cast in the comics Baron Mordo is a white dude, but he's pretty much in the comics he's a black dude, and I
Right.
understand the
Yeah.
role for diversity and so forth, and I love it because
Yeah.
I feel now like it attracts more people of color, which means more people will be into movies or into you get more diversity in Comic Cons, and you get to see your people and your heritage like represented. Because when I saw Black Panther, I was like, I nearly combusted that was for me. That's been the highlight of my life. I mean, sorry, the highlight of this year, seeing the Black Panther
Yeah. I
on
was gonna
stage because
say,
it was so
yeah.
yeah, it was
This
so dope.
this
But going
year.
back to yeah, yeah, yeah. But going back to DC, I think DC's main problem is I think they're trying to catch up to Marvel, and we all know when you rush things in life and you have no patience, um, you will self-destruct. All DC have to do is one, stay true to their characters, the substance of their characters. Two, they should have their shared universe, put color into their movies, and have fun. Because when I
Yes.
watched when I watched when I watched Man of Steel, like I was like the last time I put this on a post because one guy was trying to rant and said one guy was saying to me, yeah, my friend said Superman's a waste man, I don't like him, blah blah blah, and he was like, oh, you're hating on Superman. And I was like, well, look, man, I goes, look, DC's movies are like they're really bad, and I'm sorry to the DC fans out there. If you're going in there thinking that it's a good movie, it's really not. But what the last time I saw Superman having even the elements of Superman that we all know and love, you don't find that in the movies. Like he's depressed, he's boring, he's angry, he gets no lines in the movie, and this is no disrespect to Henry Cavill because he's actually a cool um, actor. And then it's like the last time I saw Superman being Superman was the New Adventures of Superman with Terry Hatcher and Dean Cain, and before that was Christopher Reeves as Superman. That was the last time I saw the substance of Superman. Like I said, I'm not a Superman fan, but I respect the elements of his character.
And here's where I think the key is there is exactly what you're saying is staying true. And yes, while Marvel stretches the source material, like you were saying, where Iron Man creates Ultron, when in the comics it's Hank Pym that does it. It's the fact that, and this is part of the reason that I think Marvel had the following it did, is these characters that we want them to stay true to have roots that go back much farther than the majority of the X-Men who showed up in the 60s and 70s, or the X-Men, the majority of Marvel who showed up in the 60s and 70s. You have Batman and Superman that showed up in the late 30s, early 40s. And here's the thing, Marvel has those characters too, but it's Captain America, which is why Marvel is smart and always uses Captain America as that Superman-ish, old-timey, very American values, always doing the right thing character, the character that's held up as the perfection of what all other superheroes should be. So I mean, I think that's kind of where DC feels they run into that issue where Marvel is doing better than them with the character work. But it's the, if you stay true to those characters, like give us a Superman that other people want to look up to. And I understand that maybe you want to start in a darker place so that you have somewhere to go, so that you can build up into somebody. But the problem is they're doing all of this, internal strife, and it doesn't need to be Superman Returns, where you're lifting an island full of kryptonite, even though that makes no sense. Yeah. It should be, it can be Superman being this paragon of goodness, and because those comics still exist. Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman is a perfect example. Like, there's books out there that can still use a modern context for the character, while at the same time holding them up to their original values. And I think that's where people are falling away from DC is, and it has nothing to do with, casting, actors of color into roles for characters that aren't, because again, characters created in the 40s, they were aimed at white, middle-class boys, young preteens, 12 to 15 or whatever year olds, is who all of these characters were created for. So they mirrored their audience, and now the audience is different, so you have to change it up. And that's fine. Like that, I don't think anybody who's really bothered by those things are really that bothered. Like it irks them because they've been reading a character for so many years. On your podcast, you were talking about the actress being cast as Mary Jane Watson. Yeah. And it's just, I understand that you're seeing a certain character for so many years, but look at the way she's originally drawn, and then look at the way she's drawn by Todd McFarlane in the 80s, where suddenly she's a supermodel sort of thing. And like, there's already different interpretations of that same character. And I think now in the comics, she's working for Iron Man. So,
I'm reading that.
Like,
she is.
The character is, the character is all over the place, and it's okay to have different interpretations of the character. It's just, I feel like, and this is a total separate topic, but I always liken it back to Sherlock Holmes. Nobody would care if we had a black Sherlock Holmes or something. Like, I don't think, because we have so many different interpretations, because that character has been around for since 1880, whatever it was that the first Sherlock Holmes books were published, or I suppose they were published as serials in the newspaper or whatever. But it's just that with these other characters, is it just that they haven't been around long enough for us to say, yeah, it's okay to have a black Batman? Like, that's not a big deal. The character has been around since 41 or whatever it is. So it's just, does it need to go through so many different movie iterations? Because we already talked about who's your favorite Joker, who's your favorite Batman. So clearly it's okay for there to be different iterations. Yeah. So it shouldn't be a big deal if their skin is a different color. Like you said, it's a different pigment. Like, that's not a big deal.
Yeah.
But I think that's what DC's doing is they need to get back to the core of the characters, which doesn't necessarily include a ton of internal strife. Yeah. And then it needs to have color.
Yeah, no, it's true. You know what? Like, if you take this is what I say, and this is what I realize. If you take away all the special effects in Marvel and DC, you take away all these actors like Henry Cavill, Ben Affleck, Chris Evans, Robert Downey Jr. Right? When you get to the core of it, what Marvel do better than DC is they tell better stories. because they stick to. They're like, all right, cool. We're gonna we're gonna change. You know, we're gonna say Iron Man creates Ultron, and but they still keep the substance of the characters. And I think also because there was an article that came out that was, I believe, it was tweeted by Entertainment Weekly, and I didn't read I read a bit of the article, and it said, why do DC movies get more criticized than Marvel movies? And it's like my friend Tigger said when I was interviewing. He said, look, he said the mistakes that Marvel made, because Marvel did make mistakes in their upcoming movies. I liked Iron Man 1. I didn't like Iron Man 2. Didn't like 3. The 4 movies weren't that great. The Captain America movie for me are the best Marvel solo movies they've done because it incorporates the substance of. Hey man, if you do the research on the Captain America movies, you know what they're talking about. They're talking about some real life situations. But he said to me, he goes, look, he goes, after you saw Avengers, it's like Marvel made up for all the mistakes they did in the movies, and they kept it consistent throughout the movies. And one thing I like about Marvel and that DC don't do, which they should do because they can, is they don't take chances with new characters. Like if you ever read a Luke Cage comic, you wouldn't know anything about the new Luke Cage series coming on. Jessica Jones, she's a very undercover character. Even even getting Phil Coulson, who I love, I love Phil Coulson. You know, I love him. To get him to do Agents of Shield, that was a risk. Doctor Strange is a big gamble for Marvel, and so was Guardians of the Galaxy. And I watched that movie twice. So I guess it's about really just taking chances and just having fun with your projects. Because I know there's a lot of intensity and heat between Marvel, with Marvel, because obviously they have to make money for their shareholders because it's a corporate company. But right. They do things correctly because I believe they stick to the simplicity of things. And another thing they get, what I like about Marvel is, I'm not just so we. I say this, I'm not a Marvel fanboy. I just see the differences between Marvel and DC. I do love DC comics, but I cannot get with the DC movies unless they change it.
So that said,
yeah,
Wonder Woman and Justice League coming up.
Yeah.
You've seen the trailers.
Yeah.
What do you think? Is that going in the right direction for you then?
I'll be honest, right? I'm only looking I like Wonder Woman as a character. I love her. I love her persona. I love the way she is. I love her as a character. The trailer just looked very, very sluggish. But I'm excited for the movie because Chris Pine's in there. One, because I met Chris Pine about a year ago. He's a cool guy. But I just like him as a character, and I think he'll make the movie more humorous than anything else. Because he has a very likable element about him, which is very, very cool. But the trailer was okay. It was okay, but I can see the changes they did. For example, trying to inject more humor into the movie, and even with Justice League, it looked like they tried to do a remake trailer of Avengers was, when the trailer was coming out. So it looked humorous, it looked cool, but then that's the thing with DC. So far, all they've provided us is good trailers. And
that's true. The Suicide Squad trailers were excellent, and the movie not so much.
Oh man, that movie, man. You know what? That movie, when I watched, that movie could have been so good, but it was rushed. Like the Joker got, and there was another article. There were people saying Leto was basically the worst Joker. I'm like, you guys can't even say that because he never got any screen time. So how can you judge him upon his acting? He got 7 minutes, and within those 7 minutes, half of those scenes were like flashbacks. And
plus that has nothing to do with his acting ability. That has to do with the way the character was written, and that comes down to the writers. Like, I'm sure he had a hand in crafting the character, but in general, he has to perform what's on the page. And I'm sure he did a great job of that.
Yeah, definitely. So.
Yeah, and so swinging back around to Justice League, though, because I did have one issue there, and I suppose in general we're starting to run on time-wise, but as far as humor goes, I am all about inserting humor into the DC movies. It felt a little odd. It felt a little too Guardians of the Galaxy, which was always sort of a comedy. I don't know that Justice League, it should be a bright movie, but I don't know that it should be a comedy. My big issue, though, is it should not be Batman making the jokes. Keep him dark. Keep him moody. That is perfect. That is the character. His whole thing is, my parents are dead and I'm angry about it. Like, that's it. That's his whole character. So use the Flash for humor, absolutely, especially because they're calling him Barry Allen, but it basically seems like it's the Wally West version, who's much sort of lighter, and so absolutely use him for some of the comedy. You can use, I guess, Wonder Woman a little bit. I always think that her character is best done when she's very earnest. But it's like, I mean, there's room for comedy in there. It just seemed odd that it was Batman going around making the jokes. Yeah, that's more Ben Affleck than it is Batman to me. So I hope Justice League isn't that poppy the way it was trying to look. Like Suicide Squad, absolutely. But Justice League should be a little different. It should feel heavier and like a bigger thing. Because if you put the Justice League and the Avengers up against one another in comic books, and I don't mean in a fight, I just mean as properties, I'm probably going to skew towards the Justice League just because I grew up with Grant Morrison's JLA run, where these are the most powerful characters in our comic book universe, and we're going to figure out, what sort of threats they're going to fight. They're going to be on a team together, where the Avengers has always been, and Justice League is the same as this, but Avengers has always been a rotating roster of characters, which is why it has such lasting power, is because it keeps rotating in and out characters. And Justice League has always done the same thing, but it's usually the Justice League disbands and then starts up again, where I feel like Avengers is sort of a revolving door kind of thing. But it's, I don't know, I've always just preferred, like, if you're going to give me that superhero team, it's Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, and then whoever else. The Flash, obviously. But then, if it's Aquaman or I have some of my own personal favorites from that Grant Morrison run. I like Zariel, the Angel, and that sort of thing. But I don't know. I feel like maybe that much comedy is actually the wrong way to go. Like, it doesn't need to be dark and gritty, but they're going from one extreme to the other, and I don't know if that's the right way to do it.
Yeah, no, definitely. It looks like they're really trying to change their whole angle. I think from when I watched that trailer, I thought, okay, it's okay-ish, but it looks like from that trailer, they looked like they may be thinking of actually making a comic book movie. Hopefully it will have the balance with humor and action. So I just have a funny feeling, and I really hope this doesn't happen, that Aquaman, I really hope they don't cut his lines, because it seems like in the trailer he's going to be the guy that hardly says anything in the whole movie.
Sure.
So I really, really hope that he gets more lines. I told you I enjoyed that trailer because there was no Superman in there.
Mm-hmm.
It was because man, I mean, that Superman I saw in Batman vs Superman and in Man of Steel, it was just nothing to how Superman was in the comics. And I think one thing I just don't like is the fact that he's jumping in the bathtub, with Lois Lane, and because that's Superman, he drinks milk and eats cookies.
Yeah. Aquaman gets in the bathtub.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, but one thing I just can't stand about that Superman is the way they saturated his color. Yeah. I understand Batman. Even Wonder Woman, her suit is colorful. Batman, yeah, he's dark, but Superman, that S should be glittering. Should be red.
The number of times they talk about it meaning hope in the movies, you'd think there'd be a glimmer of hope anywhere in the series.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what's interesting, right? If you actually see him in the suit, right, not in the movie, the suit actually looks pretty cool. It's actually a nice suit. It's colorful. It's just obviously they took out all the color. There's actually I don't know who it was, a guy on YouTube who actually he put all the color back into Man of Steel, the first one, and it looks so much better.
Oh, I got to go find that.
Yeah, you see it, you be like, whoa, yeah, there's actually, and you're like, whoa, it's how much color DC took out of the movie. And it was the same with Suicide Squad.
Yeah, and it's a very Scott Snyder, or not Snyder, the director. Why am I suddenly blanking? Zack Snyder.
Yeah.
It's very Zack Snyder. Like, go back and watch Watchmen. Go back and watch 300. Go back and watch Sucker Punch. They're not colorful movies. He has this look that he wants all of his movies to have, which basically screams, we shot this in front of a green screen. And yeah, it's all very desaturated. So no, I very much look forward to seeing something where they put the color back in. I suppose I could have done it myself, but I'm too lazy.
Yeah, no, man, I just actually want to watch a nice DC movie. One movie I'm really excited about is I cannot wait to see Doctor Strange.
Oh, I know.
Because I love him. Yeah, you know, when you go into the realms of the occult, magic, elements, entities, demons, rituals, sacrifices, and just full out blood and war, man. Like, he's, you know, what I loved about that trailer was, if you guys read the comic, if you guys have read the original run by Stanley, and I believe it's Steve Ditko, they actually gave you the origin story within the first teaser trailer, which is pretty cool. If you guys actually, you know, what you actually see in that trailer is pretty much like, it's the origin story. So that's what I loved about Doctor Strange. But he's one of my favorite characters, and I always said they need to do a movie because he's one of the most powerful, you know, heroes out there. And he kind of reminds me of, I guess, Batman in a way, because, you know, he went through the whole initiation to actually become who he actually became, because he started off with no powers.
And it took years of training and learning to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I cannot wait to see that movie, because it's just, you know, I love the realms of magic, and I think they said that will be the movie that might actually open up Marvel's multiverse.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Yep. We've talked about that here on the show before, where maybe, if anything, it's Marvel opening the door to the other companies and saying, hey, if you ever want to give us Fantastic Four back, if you ever want to give us the X-Men back, you can do it.
Yeah. I would love to see like an alternative version of you know, they bring in Miles Morales, or they introduce like I don't know, an alternative Thor, Avengers. You know, it's endless. You know, because that would be something that no one's really tapped into. You know, so it'll be pretty interesting to see how it works. And they said they've confirmed the runtime for that movie is, believe it's just over. It's 2 hours and 10 minutes, I think. So I'm looking forward to see. I really hope they go into really deep into his initiation. But what I love about Doctor Strange, a lot of people saying it's like a cross between Inception and The Matrix. I'm like, yeah, by the effects, but if you really understand the metaphysics behind Doctor Strange, and, you know, the occult practices in Doctor Strange, it deals with how far the mind opens up. So in a sense, the whole movie is about him opening himself and knowing himself, because that movie isn't called Doctor Strange, Master of the Mystical Arts. It's just called Doctor Strange.
Right.
So I'm thinking, all right, cool. That means this movie now is going to be pretty much him going through, because if you don't know about what Doctor Strange dabbles into, he also dabbles into black magic as well. So he gets his hand very, very dirty.
Yeah.
You know? But yeah, he's probably one of, as he starts off, you know, as the neurosurgeon, man, he's probably one of the worst people on the planet, you know. And then he becomes one of the most, he reminds me sort of like the Silver Surfer. He becomes so humble. He's so powerful, but he's so humble at the same time. So
right.
That, and of course, so I am looking forward to Strange when it hits theaters.
Absolutely. And
soon.
Yeah, that's actually, it's coming up. I think Luke Cage is probably the first thing we're getting, because that's right at the end of this month. But but we're also getting that. So cool, very cool. Well, before we wrap it up, any final thoughts? Any final things that you want to say, or if you want, you can certainly repeat where people can go out and find you on the interwebs.
Yeah, sure. So first thing I'll say to everyone out there, wherever you are, man, just keep doing what you love to do, and just not care if your passion's for comics, if it's for whatever it is. Just keep on pushing, have patience, and just, you know, don't follow money, follow what you love to do, and then the money will follow, and then you become a much more happier and you become happier, and you have internal health and external health. One of them, internal health being health. So do that. And number two, regarding this whole issue of Marvel versus DC, you know, one, like I said, it's what characters you vibrate to, and two, you guys should be lucky that you're actually alive to see Spider-Man coming into Civil War. You're getting a Batman vs Superman movie. You're getting potentially a Planet Hulk story in Thor Ragnarok. So you're getting a lot of cool things. You're getting a Justice League movie. So be happy what you're getting with, and have fun. And of course, check me out on Instagram, which is 2BritishNerdz. That's 2BritishNerdz with a Z. And I guess Facebook page, 2BritishNerdz with a Z. And check out the YouTube page, 2BritishNerdz with a Z. Literally, I'm on, and Snapchat. You know, I snap crazy. So hit me up on a Snapchat at 2British Nerds. And I guess if you guys have any questions or there's anything I can do for you guys, please let us know and let me know. But thanks for having me on the show. I've actually really enjoyed this podcast. It's actually the second podcast I've been on, which is pretty cool. So I'm happy.
Yeah, and it's the furthest away that I've had anybody on the podcast. So I definitely appreciate you coming on. And it was good. It was a good talk. I almost feel bad about cutting it short. I only have so much space on the server. But you know what that means? It means we just have to do it again at some point.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Whenever you're ready, you know, I followed you on Twitter and I've subscribed to your tweets like I do. And I've got I subscribe to so many notifications to get to be I guess more involved in the community. So yeah, man.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So feel free, you find him on my Twitter as well. I am following him and he is following me. And yeah, I don't know. Thank you.
No, thank you, man.
You'd think I'd have something better, but yeah, no,
nice.
I really appreciate it, and I look forward to the next time.
No, too, man. What I love about it also, it's just the energy is different from the way the comic book scene, nerd culture is in the UK and where you are. So it's the energy is completely different. So if you come here, you actually kind of feel, I guess, the differences. So yeah.
True. Yeah, and yeah, you better believe that if I ever find myself over in the UK, you will be hearing from me. Because there's no way that's not going to happen. But maybe I won't tell you. I'll just try and figure out where you're going to record. And like the people in your last YouTube, I'll just be walking behind you at some point while you're recording, and then jump in and take over the YouTube video.
Hijack. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Hijack the show. Yeah, it'll be fun. Yeah, why not, man?
Thanks again, man.
You too. Have a nice day, man. Thank you.
And that is it, you guys. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I certainly did. It was a blast to talk to him, and I look forward to having him on the show again at some point in the future. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Knowby, that is at KNOWBY, or I just started a brand new Twitter account this past week at Rob's Comic Box, because the Comic Box was taken, and the Comic Box podcast was taken, and Comic Box podcast everything else was taken. So I have at Rob's Comic Box, which will now be the official source for news relating to this show. You can still follow me personally on Twitter. It just kind of frees me up so that I have a place to share comic book news and things, and I'll usually share some of those posts, especially about the show itself, on my personal feed, but it allows me to open up a little bit and do some more personal things on my personal Twitter, if it's dumb jokes, that sort of thing. I just didn't want to be throwing out a ton of stuff that wasn't comic book related if that's the reason people were following me. As always, you can leave me a star rating or a review on iTunes if you want to tell me how I'm doing. You can also email me at thecomicboxpodcast@gmail.com. Finally, this is part of the Geek to Geek podcast network, so head over to geektogeekcast.net and you can sign up for updates on all 4 of our amazing Geek to Geek podcast network shows. And that is it for me this week, you guys. I look forward to seeing you next week. I won't see anybody. I just stare at a computer monitor. I look forward to you hearing my voice next week as we dig into the history that is Luke Cage. So hit me up on Twitter. Let's talk. I love talking to you guys. And that is it. So, the comic box. We are international. Had a guest from over in the UK, which is cool. Wow. I feel like I was talking really fast that episode. Good. All jacked up on excitement.